Hello, my name is Robin Hoyle. I'm the Head of Learning Innovation at Huthwaite International. This is the fourth in a four-part series of mini presentations which collectively form the presentation that I gave at the World of Learning Conference in October 2017 as the closing keynote address. In the first three parts we've talked about what learning is, that it's not just looking things up, that it is about acquiring new or modifying existing knowledge, skills, behaviour, values and preferences, and to do that in a way which is consistent with the organisational goals and the vision that the organisation has for its future. And that inevitably involves people in being involved in change and changing what they do, doing things different and doing different things, and therefore we need to understand how change happens, where there might be resistance to that change and how we can overcome that, and also that we need to address the whole of the performance, and that's not about just sending people on a course. Very often that's about a whole range of series of interventions which are closely linked together and joined up so that we get improved performance at the end. But clearly, as I mentioned in part 3, we need that learning to continue beyond the classroom door, beyond the learning intervention. And that's where the dimensions of a learning environment become important. And I want to talk you through those 4 dimensions because these are 4 areas where I think sometimes we overlook the fact that there are problems and therefore we don't create fertile ground for new skills to grow and develop. Those 4 dimensions then start with what I've called development responsibility. So ask yourself a question. Who is responsible for developing people within your organisation? And if your answer is the L&D department or somebody who sits in the HR team, then you're probably onto a loser for a start. Now, every organisation that I've ever worked with has a glossy annual brochure that they put out which says somewhere that people are our most important asset, or words to that effect. And yet the maintenance of that asset seems to be hived off to a small and sometimes overlooked and possibly much maligned department of the business. For me, development responsibility is everybody's job. It is the responsibility of the individual to build and develop their own skills. It is very particularly the responsibility of line managers and the whole hierarchy to ensure that people at the sharp end have the skills that they need to perform the tasks which will enable the organisation to perform and to deliver on its strategy. So, if your development responsibility does not sit across everybody within the organisation, then you've probably got some problems really embedding and integrating learning into the workplace and helping people to learn on the job. So first things first, check out who thinks they're responsible for development, and if it's not the line managers and if it's not everybody around the team that you're wanting to improve their performance, then you might want to take action there first before you start worrying about what the learning interventions might be. The second piece then is around that infrastructure that might be in place to help people take control of their learning. Think about this. When you're faced with a problem, where do you go? What do you use to look up the answer to a particular challenge or issue that you face? And if your answer to that is, well, I Google it, then again, like many organisations, you've not added a great deal of competitive value there, have you? Anybody can Google stuff. Your competitors can Google stuff. What we need is for people to have an infrastructure which puts them in touch quickly and easily as you would if you were using Google, to find information which is specific to your organisation, which describes the way in which your organisation wants to do things, the challenges that it faces, the opportunities that it has. And so that infrastructure needs to be in place in such a way that people think that it is as good as, if not better than, just simply Googling something. So think about where that infrastructure comes from and whether or not people can use that. Can they find it easily? Are they enabled to do so? Can they do that if they're out of the office? Can they do that if they're working on a shop floor somewhere? Can they do that if they're away from their mainframe computer? Or do they need to be logged into some massive network in order to be able to see anything at all? So think about the infrastructure and how it's used and what people's attitude to that infrastructure is, because it will be their attitude which determines as much as anything else whether or not they go to your repository of information rather than go out into Google or YouTube or somewhere else to find out how to fix the problem that they've got. And part of the issues with infrastructure and other forms of learning and development is around capability. Do your people have the capability to learn from their own experience? Can they learn on the job? Is it supported? Do their coaches or line managers have the ability to support them in that learning journey, that performance journey that they're on? Do they have the opportunity to ask questions, to maybe look a bit foolish? Do they have the opportunity to analyse what's worked and what hasn't worked and really derive lessons from it? We talked in part 3 about the importance of reflection and how that reflective model, what next, can be used very simply. That can be a 2-minute conversation in the corridor. It doesn't have to be a performance appraisal meeting. So do people have the capability and the will to ask those questions, to contribute to that continuous development process? And of course, some of that will be informed by the culture of the organisation. We work a lot with sales teams where, generally speaking, people are perceived to be competitive. And sometimes that competition can be focused inwards. They can be competing with their colleagues. They can be competing with other regions, with other teams. That's a really bad idea if you want learning to flourish within the organisation. If you want people to share good practice and share their lessons and their experiences, then having an internally competitive culture is perhaps problematic. You may also have a culture where people don't change very often, where people go back to the tried and tested because that's the way we've always done things around here. And sometimes that culture can stifle individuals who want to innovate, want to try things different. And sometimes we need to really carve out spaces for people to have the opportunity to have a go, to do things differently, maybe to fail, but to learn from their experience and try better next time and then eventually succeed, because we can't expect everybody to get absolutely everything right first time. We need to give people the opportunity not to feel threatened, not to be under threat of their job, not to be felt shamed that they haven't actually achieved all of their goals and all their targets at the first time of asking. So we need a supportive culture which enables people to learn, to grow and develop. Otherwise we will not get that ongoing learning activity. And I cannot emphasize enough that learning on the job after some kind of learning intervention is as important, if not more important, than the time and effort spent in designing the learning intervention in the first place. I see lots of L&D teams spend a lot of time designing to the very last comma and dot what will happen within a classroom, but give very little attention to what will happen when people leave the classroom. That is a mistake. We must enable people to use what they have in as supportive an environment as possible. And that might require you to have a kind of strategic focus, and you need to focus on those areas where you've got the greatest opportunity to be successful. And that, in the words of Michael Porter, means focusing on your strategy where you decide what you're not going to do as well as what you are going to do. You can't possibly change the culture of an organisation overnight. You can't deal with the infrastructure necessarily easily. You cannot deal with individuals' capability to learn, nor indeed can you change people's attitudes to who's responsible for development of people within the business at one fell swoop. It might take a strategic intervention over a number of weeks and months to create the ground. Think of it a bit like gardening. If you have some fantastic seeds but you throw them on concrete, they will not grow. If you have some fantastic seeds and you spend time creating good soil where you put organic matter in and you dig it over and you create a really lovely flower bed and then you throw your seeds, you've got a much better opportunity of having a fantastic garden come the summer. It's the same with learning and development. You need to put the spade work in to develop the ground to enable those seeds, your people, to grow, to develop and to fill their potential. I hope this series of videos has been helpful. If you have any questions at all, do get in touch with us at huthwaitinternational.com, or alternatively look me up on any of the usual social media channels. My name is Robin Hoyle, R Hoyle, and you'll find me there in most places. So do get in touch, ask a question, happy to answer them. Thank you for your attention.